Welcome to episode number 10 of Podcana, a podcast about Disney's Lorcana card game, strategy, news, discussion, all that jazz. My name is Matt DeMarco, aka Flake, joined by Brendan Patrick. How are you, buddy?
Good. Yeah, so for episode 10, we're going to be talking about how to win Gen Con. Sort of a last minute topic, but with everybody signing up, trying to get into the starter deck challenge, whatever it might be, I think we've seen all of the cards that are actually displayed on the front of these starter decks. And I think we have a pretty good idea of what these color combinations are trying to do, what their archetypes are, and which ones might be more powerful than others. Also, there's been some news around organized play, which we'll be diving into. But before all that, let's hit into that Elsa Icebreaker.
Elsa? Do you want to build a snowman?
All right, so the Elsa Icebreaker, generously submitted by actually a big fan of the show, somebody who's like all about Podcana, and we're happy to have them. It's Toby Everyday offering a question for you. It says, you're riding into battle, Brendan Patrick. Who is your mount? Who is your animal companion going into battle? There's a lot of animals out there in the Disney world. And again, I hate to always lean on Pegasus and Hercules related stuff because Pegasus seems like the best thing, flight, but there's some pretty good ones out there as well. Like maybe you just want to hang out with Baloo.
What's the name of the boar I think the boar that sings Hakuna Matata?
Pumbaa?
Yes.
But Pumbaa, like, I get it. But, like, unless you're Timon-sized, like, is that going to work? Like, you can't really... Like, don't get me wrong. He beat the crap out of those hyenas. Like, he just came in there like an absolute wrecking ball. And just... You're
breaking the fourth wall, breaking the immersion. I am Timon-sized. That's what we...
Oh, sorry. I apologize. Yeah. Yeah, we are all meerkat-sized over here. Definitely. There you go. That's some information for you.
What this makes me think of, I've actually been playing... So when I was younger, I played a lot of World of Warcraft, honestly, for a lot of my life, like a disgusting amount. And I recently circled back to play a little bit because they came out with a new community-based mod that's hardcore World of Warcraft, which means permadeath.
Oh, so no!
It's a permadeath game that's sort of rooted in like characters that probably have anywhere from 20 to 500 to 1,000 hours put into them. So it's like the most ridiculous thing, but it's in classic WoW, and I've actually been playing that. The mount thing just made me think of it because there are mounts, of course, in WoW. I've actually been really enjoying it. It kind of recaptures the old nostalgic experience because if you just play original, like classic WoW, which they actually do offer now, it's so metagamed at this point. It's just too easy, right? So you add this permadeath element, and you're not allowed to use the auction house. You're not allowed to trade, do any of that. It's if you've played ARPGs, it's solo self-found or SSF, and it's genuinely super challenging. I've actually been really enjoying that. I've been playing it with my brother, but yeah, the mounts just made me think about it. I just wanted to share that.
I played World of Warcraft for a solid like 6 months of my life. Like when I moved to Toronto and I had nothing else to do, that's how I connected with some friends. I created a frost mage named Cold Spark. That was the name of my character. What was the name of your character?
So it depends, right? Like the name of my character most recently when I was raiding a lot was Fiddy, like Fiddy, because it was originally Fiddy Shades, which was just like some ripoff of 50 Shades of Grey, because I thought that book was hilarious. But then it was just Fiddy plus like whatever class I was playing, like RM. So I played World of Warcraft up until about Battle for Azeroth, and I was raiding in a guild that would compete for the world first rating. We weren't expected to win. It was basically it's a really popular thing now, but there's a guild called Limit in the United States. They have all the sponsors. There's like a big thing on Twitch every time they raid. So it's a bit more popular now. But we were effectively a feeder guild for that. And I quit World of Warcraft right as esports came in. Unfortunately, I was wasting my life trying to actually get into that guild if anybody's aware of it. But did end up having to stop playing because it was all consuming at that point. But yeah, I played basically since I played since 2004, Flake. I played in my parents' living room computer Mac, as like a Tauren hunter that didn't do quests and just killed things because I didn't know.
Like an 8-year-old, right?
Yes.
Like just jamming it out there. That's pretty hardcore, I'm not going to lie. But the one thing that you said that absolutely gave me big time anxiety was when you mentioned like permadeath, where you show up, you you get absolutely gooned by somebody and then you lose all your stuff. You have to start from scratch. Like, I would never do that. I get like this weekend, for those who might know, we were in Pittsburgh doing a Flesh and Blood tournament, casting Brendan and I, and at the Airbnb they busted out boxes of, like, I forgot what it was, like Outsiders or whatever, because they were doing Flip It or Rip It. And for those who are unaware of Flip It or Rip It, two people sit across from each other, they open packs, they shuffle them face down, then they put two cards face down, and the person across from them picks one, and without looking, you just tear it in half. Now, the other aspect, like, I had anxiety because I'm like, what's amazing was, like, in the few games that they played, all of the high rarity cards survived, the cold foils survived, until somebody said, oh my God, imagine we ripped that. And then the person I was with, some dude by the name of Logan, said, oh, you mean like this? And then picked up the cold foil and tore it in half, just to, like, prove a point. However, what gave me the most anxiety was the owner of the Realm Games, Keith Bartram, said
he loves Flip It or Rip It.
He is so damn horny for this, because he's like, I have a case of alpha in the truck. Do I go get it? And everybody was like, yeah. And I was like, no, like, please no. He leaves, and I'm like, you guys are honestly going to tear open a $5,000 or $6,000 box of cards.
Yeah, so that we should give people the baseline. So it's probably around $5,000 to $6,000, and all-time high price on the box is probably like a $10,000.
So the case is like close to a $20,000 case of cards, and in my mind, like I was freaking out, and he comes back with this very disappointed look on his face. He's like, it was in the other van that already went back to Ohio. And I was like, thank God, because I was having heart palpitations. And again, I understand it's just cardboard. But as somebody who would, I'm like, when they ripped that cold foil, it was like a scale peeler. I was like, I don't have this card. I need this card. Like, I don't have this card for my collection.
I enjoy games like Flip It or Rip It. I'm less of a gambler, to be honest. I'm not like a degenerate gambler, but I am very degenerate for high stakes. That's why I love permadeath games. It's also, if I ever do get to a far in a tournament, top 8 or competing for the finals, it's very common for card players to ask for a split, especially when the prize disparity is large. Split it down the middle, decrease sort of the opportunity cost or risk of one player losing. And I always ask ask for a compromise, right? All or nothing, because for some reason that's so much more fun for me. I would never split a finals unless I was very good friends with the person or I legitimately did not want to play the game. But yeah, that's kind of it's a very degenerate way to view card games. I know some people like they definitely frown upon, like, they'll all or nothings.
They'll come out of, like, it's like somebody came out of there. They were sleeping in the Airbnb room because this was going down at like 10 or 11 o'clock, and they're like, they came up, they're like, I heard Flip It or Rip It. I'm like, you guys are psychotic. Has everyone ever taken you up on the offer of all or nothing in a major stakes tournament, or like at least like decently high stakes?
No, they always wuss out because I never asked for a split, right? So the person that's coming to ask me is already asking for a risk mitigating play, right? By splitting. So the all or nothing is about as far away from their desired outcome as possible.
Yeah, but they might be looking for the check raise on you, where you're like, they check and you go all in, and they're like, gotcha, bitch.
I hope so. I hope one day that somebody does that. It does make it more exciting, for sure. But I will admit I have split a couple finals in my days, but only with close friends.
All right, so let's answer the question. So for me, it's Pegasus. The second, I think, is Carpet. I would take Carpet from Aladdin.
Carpet's a good one.
But that's a creature. I'm kind of counting it as a creature.
I'm going to stick with my answer, even though I already forgot his name.
What was it again?
Hakuna Matata.
Oh, Pumbaa. Okay, yeah.
Pumbaa.
Yeah, because you're Timon sized. You measure like a foot and a half on your tiptoes. All right. So we've got some headlines, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get to how to win Gen Con in the first ever, I guess, tournament that they're going to be running with starter decks. But before we get to that, we do have some information that we want to just pass along. The first little bit of information is that no new cards have leaked as of when we're actually recording this. And we record every 2 weeks. Like, we give ourselves a wide berth here to paint this with a broad stroke as possible. And it is May 31st. It's the end of May. We have not seen a new card. Maybe that'll change when this gets published on Friday. However, as it stands now, no new cards. And I'm going to ask you this, Brendan. It seems like they've kind of maybe, I don't want to say they've run out of gas, but, like this game, when it was discussed and sort of teased early on, and then they started just trickling out cards, not the rules, just the cards, figure it out, cheers, and then finally here comes the rules. But like the game is not launching for another 2.5 months,
which is not that far away, to be honest. Like you could still do a card like I think every day at that rate, well at least. So it's launching pretty soon. Lorcana at this point feels a bit like an abusive relationship. They're just so hot and so cold sometimes. They just give us so much and then so little. I think the big meme in the Lorcana community is that there were a lot of people that were really hyped for Lorcana, maybe started Lorcana podcast, maybe doing content for Lorcana. And then as soon as Star Wars Unlimited got announced, just immediately switched. Like there's literal podcasts that actually just rebranded and are now Star Wars podcasts on the same brand, right? So with the same listener base, subscriber base. I don't think we're in that scenario, right? Like Lorcana, to be honest, is not really the hot thing anymore. But that's just the nature of things. I know it's a bad way to describe it, but that's how it is, right? Star Wars came out, it was just like the new shiny thing, and there's more unknowns, and you're like, what are the rules? What do the cards look like? What are the archetypes? We kind of know a lot of that stuff about Lorcana now, so it has lost a bit of excitement. I think they can capture it back easily, and I don't think it's the game itself that will launch in 2 months has lost like all of its momentum. It's just due to the content schedule and due to a competitor coming out that nobody expected in the form of Star Wars Unlimited announcing their game. Yeah, so the hype for Lorcana has definitely sort of tapered down a little bit. Although I genuinely don't think it's a bad thing. I wish though, Flake, for our sake, that they would please release more cards or at least develop some sort of cadence or schedule because, yeah, I mean, like I said, hot and cold for sure.
So that might change because we have heard through our sources that a new community manager, a new global community manager has started work this week. This person has, and now I have been asked not to essentially give away this person's details, names, and whatever, just sort of to protect their privacy and so they're not bombarded with stuff. But the new community manager has started this week, and the new community manager also has had success in other card games. So that might be something that they're going to be involved in terms of pumping the tires of the other piece of news, which is that as much as we in the past several episodes have kind of really were hyped about organized play, had thoughts about what that might look like, got news of it, tried to sort of make heads or tails of what that's going to look like. And ultimately, they said that there's nothing coming in terms of major organized play. They've kind of rewinded on that, or perhaps clarified, because maybe we got ahead of ourselves and the community did too. But from the Discord, the Lorcana Discord, Team Lorcana themselves just said, hey, and I'm quoting them here, we want to clarify incorrect speculation about Disney Lorcana's organized play program. While the program's organized play structure is designed to welcome new players, there is still plenty of room for competitive play. Please stay tuned. We'll be releasing more information about our plans soon. Now, that doesn't really say anything about the fact that they're going to have like what we were discussing, like a pro tour and like high level competitive gameplay. It doesn't say that. It just says, it literally says there's room for for competitive play. What does that mean to you?
What does that mean to me? It means we're seeing all of our competitors come out with organized play and we didn't have any plans for it. Now we have to adjust. That could be wrong, right? That could be a cynical take, but it does look like they're adjusting to what the market's doing, right? And TCGs that are coming out nowadays are coming out with organized play, and players seem to be interested in organized play. Let's say even if it was true, when the first announcement dropped it, and it was a rumor, right? So this is not true, that Lorcana was not going to have organized play for the first year. I think that was fine, to be honest. I actually think it was a positive announcement in the sense that they gave us a legitimate timeline in which to expect organized play. But there was one take that I did sort of have issue with, which was people sort of looking at that announcement, the lack of organized play as a win for casual gameplay. They're like, I didn't even want competitive anyway. I'm just going to have fun. And that's fine. You don't have to compete in Lorcana, and you don't have to take it in a competitive, play it in a competitive manner. But I think Lorcana, like if Ravensburger truly devotes zero resources to competitive play, I don't think it's a win for you as a casual player. I think it's still a loss. I think it's still resources that could have attracted more players to the game, more money that could have been invested in the community, etc., that could have potentially just be taken out. The counter argument is that it might be sort of spread out into other avenues, and I would doubt it. I don't think that it would sort of percolate that way. So I think whether you're a competitive player or playing to be a competitive player or not in Lorcana, competitive play, or at least Ravensburger supporting it, putting in effort, and acknowledging that there's an appetite for it is a win for everybody. It's an obvious win for people who want to play competitively, but even for people that are playing casually, it just brings more people to the game. And it's Ravensburger devoting resources, time, money, etc., into the game, which they might not be doing otherwise if they didn't have the competitive play.
I don't see how people can kind of get an addition by subtraction in terms of this, because there's going to be a lot of players, possibly myself included to a degree, that, I mean, like, I'm already into this game and I'm already, having fun playing it casually, but there are going to be people out there who are not even going to, like, for instance, Magic for me, I only started playing Magic heavily in 2018 because there was a competitive aspect. And once I got into the competitive aspect of standard and tournaments, etc., that's when I said, I'm like, okay, like, I'm cool to just go and play for fun casually at like a draft or like a FNM or whatever, because I'm already ingrained in the competitive side, because they've already hooked me with that. But if that didn't exist, it's not a win for the game because they're lacking a certain element or a certain entire division or a demographic that they can appeal to. So what I wonder or worry about to a degree is if they don't have any outlet for higher competitive play, how many players are just going to completely skip over the game that may have said, I'm in for both. But if you don't have, I'm in for both or none. And if you don't have what I'm actually interested in, which is competitive play, then I'm not even going to take a sniff at the casual stuff.
Yeah, I think that if Lorcana launches with zero support for the foundations of what can foster competitive play at the grassroots level, things like a comprehensive rule set, a judge program, etc., I do think that will be extremely bad for the game, even on a casual level. Because if you can't even play a game on a grassroots level, getting people together, maybe your tournament isn't for $1 million, right? Maybe it's for store credit, right? Or you get to be the winner of the store for that month. Like you need some of these foundations in order to sort of run those card game tournaments. They're not competitive tournaments, but they're tournaments. And I think if they look at this game as just a completely casual game and they don't give us some way to have extremely comprehensive rules that can encapsulate all of the scenarios you're going to run into, or some sort of judge program so people can be arbiters of said rules, like, it's really, really bad for the game, in my opinion. Is it a death blow? No, but these are things that this game should be launching with as a modern TCG.
Well, we'll see what happens. Again, it's one of those, hurry up and wait kind of scenarios where it's just an announcement of an announcement of an announcement. And
it's like 2 months is not a long time. Like,
it's not.
It is really coming out soon. That I'm genuinely surprised that it has been so silent and so inconsistent in terms of announcements. This is a brand new TCG, so this isn't a Flesh and Blood expansion where they're going to do a new set where they're going to do a spoilers in like 1 week or a weekend. This is a brand new card game. They really should be dripping out this information, and they have plenty of content to do it with. This is the first set of the game. They should be dripping out these cards. Like, I don't know why they're going totally silent here. Like you said, maybe they didn't have a community manager, and now they do. So that could change. But I guess that kind of explains it if they genuinely didn't have one before this. So hopefully we start getting some info.
Well, that's what we're all hoping for. And again, as we kind of approach launch day, which is going to be, I think, the end of August. I mean, that's 2.5 plus. It's more than 2.5 months away, which for some is minutes and for others feels like years. But ultimately, that's the reality of it. And hopefully that new stuff is going to be trickling in soon because we're rubbing up against it. All right. We want to get you winning at Gen Con. Now, again, if you're listening to this, there are others who are listening to this who might be going to Gen Con. So only one of you will win. However, we want it to be one of you listeners. So we're going to get you prepped here. So walk us through the strategy here as I believe, first of all, Brendan, tell us what the actual tournament is.
So it's a starter deck tournament, from what I understand. I don't know if all the starter decks are going to be equally available or if they're first come, first serve. I assume they'll be along the lines of first come, first serve, in which case it will benefit you greatly to know what the best deck potentially is, so you don't pick the wrong one or get stuck with one.
I just want to interject here because I was actually looking at, I think I took a look at some of the comments from the previous episode, and there was somebody who actually commented and said that we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. It's a starter deck tournament. No one's going to care like that. It's not, no one's going to take it seriously. And I'm like, I didn't reply there, so I'll reply here. It's competition. If people are gonna care. Did you see how fast those tickets sold out? People care, and they are going to want to win.
It's the pinnacle of competition for Lorcana. So this happened in Flesh and Blood. So Flesh and Blood, it currently has things like Pro Tours and Worlds, but at one point it didn't have that. So it had Road to Nationals, it had Callings, which were like Magic Grand Prix, and then it had Nationals. Before they had Pro Tours and Worlds, whatever was the highest event, whatever was the highest level you could get to, that was the premier event. So at one point, Road to Nationals were very, very competitive. And nowadays, they're more casual events because you have these higher outlets in the form of Pro Tour Worlds. In Lorcana, the highest outlet that you can aspire to for competitive play is the starter deck tournament at Gen Con. That's what it is. So I disagree that people won't care. I would agree with him and say that it doesn't matter. So does winning matter? No, absolutely not. Are people going to want to win, and are people going to try to get clout from winning this tournament? Absolutely. This is competitive Lorcana at this point. They're putting on a tournament. I mean, it's not a super casual thing. Like, there's going to be a winner. I believe there's prizes too, which and they're pretty significant, right?
What makes me happy is that there was a lot of people who actually bought multiple tickets and then tried to scalp them, and then all of those people got gooned because they realized that they could not resell the tickets. And like a lot of those people who bought the initial ones, like, so all the people who bought out the events and could not resell them because they were non-transferable, get bent. You got hosed, so suck on that. That made me laugh.
I mean, that should be a little bit of foreshadowing for the actual card game coming out. People trying to scalp, so get ready for that, by the way. Anyway, it's a starter deck tournament, and the starter decks, there's 3 of them right now. There is Amber, Amethyst, Emerald, Ruby, and Steel Sapphire. And we don't know the exact cards in them. We don't. But we know the cards that are on the front, and we know a lot of cards in these colors. And I think we can extrapolate from the gameplay what these decks are trying to do. Because a lot of these cards are sort of marquee cards in specific archetypes. Like Mickey is doing the broom stuff. You have Maleficent in red, maybe recurring stuff with Lady Tremaine, or doing 2-for-1 spot, target removal with damage. You have blue, which is unconditional removal. You have things like Moana, which is this high defensive butt that reaps for a lot of damage. Et cetera, et cetera. So I think we can really extrapolate from the cards we've seen so far what could potentially be in these decks and what the best color combinations might be. But in addition to the starter deck, you do get one booster pack, which it's significant. It's not nothing. I don't know how I can account for that as a variable, but
I'm trying to think of like where this has ever kind of mattered. And again, I hate to always just harp back on Star Wars CCG, but Star Wars CCG's starter decks used to come with, it was like a set. I think it was like a set 30 plus 10 randomized cards. But if you opened it and you hit a bomb, then you play the bomb and you win the game. Like, that was basically how it worked. So there's going to be a little bit of variance in here but the worst thing that could probably happen is let's say you pick up the steel, what is it, Emerald or Steel Sapphire. You pick up Steel Sapphire and you pick up like the Mickey Mouse Ruby card. Like you'll feel really bad and good at the same time because it's an unplayable bomb that you just picked up. But ultimately, yeah, you need to know what, like, within the variables that you already are accounted for, or that are accounted for. You need to be able to distinguish like what you're doing with the deck, what the best deck is outside of the extra booster pack that's in there that might sort of jazz up your deck.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's start with the control deck, which I genuinely believe is going to be Sapphire Steel. So the marquee card for Steel here is Simba, which is like the challenger card. Simba is a 4/6 storyboard king, costs 7, can be turned into a resource, has challenger 4, which means while challenging, this character gets +4 attack. So in that case, it would become an 8/6. It has pounce. It says during your turn, this character gains evasive, and it reaps for 2 pips. Just a little top end, a top end card that can pretty much clear anything your opponent could possibly play on the board. The other card is Aurora, Dreaming Guardian, which is a 3/5, cost 5, can be turned into a resource, has shift 3, which means you can play it on top of another Aurora for 3 instead of paying that 5. It has a ability called Protective Embrace, which says your other characters gain ward, and it reads for 2 pips. So this is this Aurora, I could see this giving the rest of your creatures ward, and you're maybe countering a deck like the Ruby Emerald deck, which might be using things like Dragonfire, which is spot removal, and ward does very well against that. Aurora as well is just a well-stated card. But these are the most controlling-esque cards. I think these challenger cards, Steel, which has also item removal, it has sort of big butts in general, is a way to describe it. It has a particular card called Fire the Cannons, which says it costs 1, cannot be turned into a resource, and says deal 2 damage to chosen character. A card which is pretty underwhelming in and of itself, but can be recurred with another card called Captain Hook, Captain of the Jolly Roger, a 3/4, cost 4, can't be turned into a resource. It says double the power. When you play this card, you may return an action card named Fire the Cannons from your discard to your hand and reach for 1 pip. That loop right there is actually very, very powerful in Lorcana right now. And I expect it to be powerful in the starter decks, is this Captain Hook recurring Fire the Cannons. It sort of just draws you a card, right? And this dealing 2 damage is very, very effective. It makes it so you don't have to 2-for-1 your creatures into something. You can sometimes just kill it with Fire the Cannons itself, etc. Steel also has access to another card called Beast Mirror. Cost 2, can be turned to resource. It's an item, and it says show me. Tap 3 and pay 3 resources. If you have no cards in hand, draw a card. I mean, this is really, really important. If these are sort of somewhat underpowered starter decks, which I expect them to be, card draw is very, 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 very powerful, and you will find yourself in the mid to late game very frequently in Lorcana with no cards in hand. Very little cards to no cards in hand, in which Beast Mirror is basically a better on-rate magic mirror in that case. Just lastly here, Steel's got some big top end in the form of like Gone 2. I'm not sure if that'll be in the deck, but I'm pretty sure the reason why Sapphire is paired with this is because of things like Aurora, right? Disrupting your opponent's ability to interact with your board, but also for removal cards like Let It Go, which is a song, cost 5, can be turned into resource. It says put chosen character into player's inkwell face down exerted. So just unconditional removal. I believe that this is a sort of defensive challenger removal deck, right? And blue, of course, has ramp. Blue has quite a bit of ramp. It has the Mickey Mouse, which takes something off the top, as well as another card called One Jump Ahead, which does the same thing, gets you another resource. I don't know if this is going to be very much of a ramp deck, more than you have that removal, which is critical. You have Challenger, and yeah, I think this is the control deck of the starter decks.
I think that if it's a starter deck, it's going to try to explore little bits and pieces of what each color kind of represents and has access to. So you'll see a little bit of ramp, you'll see a little bit of spot removal. I wouldn't be surprised if this deck just has a play set of Fire the Cannons in it. The big drops are going to be the Simbas, the Auroras, and such like that. This to me is going to be the deck that's going to kind of grind out wins. It's going to be very challenging. It's going to go ahead and quest for lore when it can, but its objective is going to be to, like you said, to control the board, to slow down the game, and to like quest for 1, quest for 2, quest for 3 here and there. It's not going to be sort of like that swarm overwhelming. I'm questing for 9. You could deal with my dudes. I'm just going to establish more board and such like that. Again, we don't know what the contents of the starter decks are, and I don't believe it's released yet. But you could probably imagine that you're going to have a couple of each common in there. Maybe a couple of the rares, and then your big hitters, which are going to be the characters on the front of the box.
Well, I was going to say, we don't know the exact cards, but we do know some cards that are in the deck, and that's why it's which are the cards on the front of the box, right? And in particular, the Amethyst Amber deck has 2 of the most powerful cards in the game put on the front of the box. Or if you look at the Emerald Ruby deck, both those cards are kind of bad, to be honest. Let's go ahead and talk about Emerald Ruby. So Emerald Ruby is Cruella de Vil and Aladdin. Cruella de Vil is a 2 cost that can be turned into a resource. It's a 1/3, and it says you'll be sorry when this character is challenged and banished. You may return chosen character to its player's hand. It reads for 1 pip. I mean, this card is just fine. It is very, very average, which is funny with it being on the front of the deck. In contention with things like Aladdin, Moana, Mickey Mouse, Aurora, Simba. It's just not on that level for me. It's just a very average card. It would go in all of my green decks, but everything goes in all my green decks right now, or my emerald decks, because there are no emerald cards that have really been spoiled. But Cruella de Vil, probably the least powerful card on here. Aladdin, on the other hand, I mean, this kind of points to maybe a more aggressive strategy. I think that most of the things we've seen out of Ruby have been aggressive. Aladdin is a 7 cost, can be turned into a resource 5/5. It has shift 5, so you can pay 5 to play this and put it on top of another Aladdin. It says daring exploit during your turn whenever this character banishes another character into challenge, you gain 2 lore, and each opponent loses 2 lore. It reaps for 2 pips. This card is a bit of a, play it, win the game kind of card. That being said, your opponent can genuinely play around it. Like, this card is, in my opinion, it's not very good top end, especially compared to things like Maleficent Monstrous Dragon, which come in and immediately 2 for 1, or Mickey Mouse, which reaps for 4 pips. Mickey Mouse and Ruby, by the way, which reaps for 4 pips, has evasive. It's so hard to deal with. I do think that the Emerald Ruby deck will have evasive characters in it, and I think that will be a key theme. And I do believe that's why we see an evasive character in the form of Simba on the Steel deck as well to help deal with this red deck. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a bit of a mid-range deck, utilizing the cards that are on the front, just general good stuff cards, as well as the key removal of this deck, which is going to be probably Dragonfire, which I think is probably the most powerful card in the game. It just banishes chosen character. 5 cost, can't be turned to a resource, action.
I think also just really quick, like, because the fact that Aladdin has shift 5, it's a high end card. Obviously, it's got a shift 5. But the 2-drop Aladdin is Emerald, so that's going to pair with that color. And it's a 2/2 with Ward. So it'll be protected. So you can kind of shift it out if you get lucky to cheat it out early. And then at that point, maybe that's the game plan for this deck, is to sort of protect your units. But then, like you said, if you can get Aladdin out on 5, if you can shift him out on 5 and mess around at 5, steal your opponent's lore, get your lore going, you're kind of hoping that your opponent doesn't have an answer for it that early. But I think that the only way that this deck can actually benefit is if you can get the Aladdin out early and then steal their lore, get your lore before they can ramp up to their big hitters that can potentially put it out of its misery.
I think this is the mid-range deck. So we talked about Steel, Sapphire being the control deck. I think this is the mid-range deck. Which is fine. And the reason why I haven't ranked them in power level quite yet is because we're going to hop over to the third deck here, which in my opinion is probably going to be objectively the best deck, because it has 2 of the most powerful cards in the game right now, like by quite a bit on the front. And that's Moana and Mickey Mouse. We'll start with Mickey Mouse because Mickey Mouse is freaking busted. So Mickey Mouse, Wayward Sorcerer, it's a 4 cost, can be turned into a resource. It's a 3/4. It says animate Broom. You may pay 1 less to play Broom characters. Careless Worker, another ability. When one of your Broom characters is banished in a challenge, return that card to hand, and this card reads for 2 pips. So this card is busted because these Brooms, they're 2 costs, can be turned to resource, 2/2s, and when you play them, you can shuffle a card from the discard into a player's deck. You might shuffle your good card into your deck, or you might shuffle a bad card in your opponent's deck. But they come for 2 pips. So basically, these things, they come down and they can just attack into anything. They can clear board, and you can sacrifice them into your opponent's creatures for no cost because they go back to hand. And you play them again for at most 1 if you have Mickey on board, and it's very, very hard for anything to deal with because if your opponent's playing something like an Emerald Ruby, they can't Dragonfire a Magic Room. They have to Dragonfire your Mickey. If your Magic Room gets 2 instances of value, right, comes down as a 2/2, kills something, kills itself, goes back to hand, you play it again, that's so much value. You don't get value like that in any other kind of cards in Lorcana. And Mickey Mouse is genuinely one of the most powerful things you can do. All right, the other card on the front is Moana, which is a 5 cost, can be turned to a resource, and it's a 1/6. It says we can fix that. When this character quests, you may ready other princess characters. They can't quest for the rest of the turn, but the key thing is it reads for 3 pips. So a 5 cost, it comes down as a 1/6, it can't be cleared by any other 5 costs. You got to hit this thing with like a Dragonfire and immediately progress your game plan towards 3 pips. You're often going to be getting 6 out of this because you quest with it, your opponent attacks into it, they can't kill it on their own turn if you've been maintaining board parity. And then that's more than 25% of your win condition. It's running away with the game. Amethyst, on top of that, we talked about Mickey Mouse. Amethyst has the most powerful cards in the game. Anybody who doesn't think that right now is absolutely wrong. I'm sorry. The only other card that competes at all with Amethyst cards is Dragonfire, but Amethyst has Pascal, objectively the best 1-drop in the game right now. Rapunzel's Companion, it's a 1/1, 1 cost, can be turned into a resource, has Camouflage. While you have another character in play, which is freaking always, this character gains evasive and it reads for 1 pip. This thing will gain you so many pips in the start of the game. You have access to Elsa to tap down sort of hazardous things from your opponent, and then you have the best card draw spells in the game. You have things like Magic Mirror, which is an item that can draw cards, and you have, I don't know if it'll be in the deck because they're so broken, Maleficent Sorceress, which is a 2/2, cost 3, can be turned into resource, and when you play it, it draws a card, reach for 1 pip, so it replaces itself. But then you have a 3-cost Song that can also be turned into a resource, which is so broken. I don't know why it does that. It's a song, and it says draw 2 cards. So you can play Maleficent on 3, it replaces itself. Then on turn 4, you can play Friends from the Other Side, tap Maleficent, draw an additional 2 cards. You drew 3 cards. It's so good. Like, nothing competes with the card advantage that those 2 cards generate right now in the early game. It's so freaking good. I do think that Amethyst is better paired with Steel at the moment, considering all the spoilers that we have. But prior to Steel getting access to Captain Hook to recur fire the cannons, as well as the beast that blows up items, which kind of breaks the mirror in the Amethyst Steel mirror, I thought that Amethyst Amber was the best deck in the game. And this is an aggro deck. This will be an aggro deck. But what's funny about Amethyst I always forget freaking Amethyst Amber. What's funny about it is the aggro deck, but it's also the deck that draws the most cards, gets the most mid-range value out of cards like Magic Broom, and has one of the most pesky evasive characters in the game, which is Pascal. I think if you're going to Gen Con and you have to pick a deck, I would snap pick Amber Amethyst.
So let's talk a little bit then, Brendan. So we're in agreement here. That's the deck. That's the best deck. Given all the information we have, that is the best deck that you could possibly hope to pick or get assigned. I don't know what the rules are going to be if you're just assigned a list, or you have to be like you go and you buy.
That'd be such a feels bad if it was. If I mean, hopefully it's not first come first serve. That's the worst case scenario. But also getting assigned would suck. Hopefully they have enough product that people can play.
Well, that's the problem because, and again, not to sort of go harp on the comments that we got earlier when I was talking about, like, you know, what happens if everybody wants the same thing and they don't have it, then it becomes a race to line up, and that's just an awful experience altogether. But given what we know, is this just the best deck to go ahead and select?
Even if I talked about some cards that are not in the front of the box, right? They could be in there. They're really powerful cards. Assuming that these decks only, like, the only cards that we could know are the cards on the front of the box, Mickey Mouse and Moana are so much better than any of the other 2 hero character combinations you see on the other starter deck boxes that you should just pick this deck if you don't know. They're not even close. Like Aladdin and Cruella de Vil are nowhere close. Aurora and Simba, like, not even in the same universe. Like, these 2 cards are currently, with the entire card pool we have, 2 of the best cards in the game. So I think you just snap pick Amber Amethyst.
What I'm looking at when I see this is because, like, at this rate, when you don't know what's in there, or you don't necessarily you might not have as much experience as this game, obviously, because it's the first major tournament that they're going to put out there. You're looking at the heroes, and again, all you know is what's on the box and the heroes that are there. And you're correct; these are just inherently the better characters out of the 6 that are being presented. And it just so happens that they're paired up together in a deck. That said, it's not just about the fact that they're good enough; it's the fact that they are good on their own, completely void of whatever's going on the other side of the board. The characters that are on the board are going to be able to do things on their own that are not. Like, for instance, Simba needs to challenge. That's where he's good at. He needs your opponent to have stuff on the board to do stuff. The ward aspect of who is that? Aurora. Like, Aurora giving ward.
They're all reactive. Like, that's
correct.
The thing is, both Challenger is currently, and it might change in a constructed format in a narrow meta, but Challenger currently kind of sucks because your opponent can play around it. It's completely reactive, and your opponent can play around it. Ward is the same way. And the thing is, the Sapphire deck isn't compelling enough for the war to actually come into effect, because the deck you're playing against can simply outrace you and outvalue you through cards, which is often going to be Amethyst. That's sort of where it comes from me. Even if these heroes weren't on the front, Flake, I genuinely believe, looking at the card design tenets of each one of these colors, Amethyst is just so far ahead of everything else, because for some reason they printed the best 1-drop in Amethyst, which makes it a good aggro deck. They printed the highest the value generating card, which is Mickey Mouse. But then also Amethyst draws all the freaking cards. Like, why would you play the control deck? You're gonna get you'll get beat in the late game by an Amethyst deck because they draw the cards. And their Mickey Mouse is recurring, literally effectively drawing cards by bouncing the broom back to hand. It's nuts. Like,
I don't know if the game has like must answer cards just yet, but if there would be some, I think that Mickey Mouse is like, once that hits the board, your number one mission is to get that cleaned up. Yep. And it comes down early too. It comes down early. Like there's other must answer cards, yes, but they come super late. Like you could say Aladdin is a must answer card, but in order to get it out in a reasonable amount of time, you have to shift it. It's just not as good. And Aladdin it's an aggressive. It looks like an aggressive card because you can take your opponent's resources, but it feels a bit reactive, I guess, in a way. It just feels like your opponent can run circles around you when you put Aladdin down. There are board states in which you put Aladdin down, your opponent just won't be able to reap. But it's sort of a win more card because if you're winning, I just don't think your opponent doesn't play into Aladdin. They usually won't let you get value out of Aladdin unless they're losing the game. So yeah, I genuinely think that Amethyst is just absolutely the best right now. All right, so we've isolated that it's in fact the best deck that you should be playing, given the information that we have. Now, between now and when this occurs, if like suddenly we find out that there's other cards, well, listen, we're just playing with the variables that we are aware of. That said, let's talk a little bit. Like, let's give them kind of like, that's the best deck. How far behind are the other two? Because maybe players are just like, you know what, I want to try this. Maybe I do like Steel Sapphire because of the control element and such. Is it in somebody's interest as a control player at heart for them to lean into their strengths? And now, obviously, we're taking fun out of the equation here, because if you want to have fun, play whatever the hell you want. That's obviously always an option. We're telling you what the best decks are and whatnot. But do you think that in this game, with like a fresh game, that leaning on your strengths might be a better option?
It depends it depends on the contents of the deck. I think if there is card draw disparity, like there currently is in the different colors, then some decks will just be really bad compared to others. Because the fact that Amethyst has the best aggro cards and has late game card draw better than any other color, like that's the perfect storm. That never happens. Like you don't get aggro decks that can win in late game because they'd be broken, right? And again, we really don't. We don't know. All I'm telling you is that if you show up on day one, they present you with 3 decks. I would say through all of the cards that I've seen, through all the gameplay I've done, if you're a gambling person, pick Amethyst. Pick Amethyst Amber. I think that is the best gamble. There definitely is going to be cards we haven't seen in these decks, but those two colors are very solid, and I think Amethyst is genuinely the best. And the 2 characters on the front are significantly better than the other ones represented on the other 2 decks. So
what would you say is that, let's say you can't get a hold of that deck, of the other 2, what are you taking?
So just off what I know, right, I would probably take Sapphire Steel and just hope that it has Beast Mirror in it. Yeah. If I knew the cards that were in there, it would change a lot. But if I had to just go in not knowing anything, I think Aladdin is okay, right? But you play Aladdin, it gets hit by that 5-cost song out of blue that just turns it into a resource. And then the other card you see on the green deck is Cruella de Vil, which is it's not that good. It's just not that impactful. It's good for what it is. It's a 2-drop, but it's not that impactful of a card. I would be playing something like Sapphire Steel, because Sapphire Steel will have unconditional removal. It should have card draw, not as good card draw as Amethyst, and it should have it does technically have answers to evasion, which the red deck might present through the form of Simba, who is on the front of the deck, who is on the front of the starter box, so who will be in the deck. So I genuinely think that is definitely, that would be the second for me. I don't even know if it's too far behind in a second to something like Amber Amethyst. It really depends what's in the deck, but just extrapolating from what's on the front, I think Sapphire Steel could be decently close behind.
That's kind of what I'm leaning on, because I feel like if you're going to be, like you mentioned, I think the Fire the Cannons is just in limited. I think it's just a very good card that you probably need, and that you're an average player might not necessarily respect as much as they can. And if the deck does have Captain Hook that does allow you to recur the card, then it's not so bad. But like the way that I'm envisioning this is that the Amber Amethyst deck is basically dictating the pace, and the other decks need to provide answers just to equalize the board, just to sort of maintain that pace. Whereas everything that Amber and Amethyst is putting out there is just well beyond everything, and they're putting the pressure on the opponent to match or answer or fall behind. And that in a limited tournament without construction, without you being able to say, I know what's out there, I can tailor my deck to answer it. There's no sideboard, there's no nothing, there's no constructive aspect. It's what you have is what you get, and everybody's more or less playing with 95% of the same stuff in their deck, because even the booster pack they open might have nothing that is worth putting into your deck. So you need to lean on the starter deck itself. Now,
I would be yeah, I just want to say that the one right now in last place for me, kind of by quite a bit, is Emerald Ruby. I would change my mind if the front of the deck was Lady Tremaine and Maleficent, because that Lady Tremaine combined with Ruby would tell me that they have Dragonfire in the deck, and you can do the Dragonfire loop, which is you play Lady Tremaine and it gets the action card out of your discard and you get Dragonfire back. So you sort of loop this removal. It's pretty good, but Lady Tremaine is a very greedy card because it can't be turned into a resource. So it's not even the best thing you can do in Lorcana. It's just a good thing. And then Maleficent is just the best top line card there is because it 2-for-1s your opponent and it has hard stats to deal with. That's not what's on the deck. So it's probably not that sort of combo loop-oriented Ruby Emerald deck. It could still be in there, but that would make it more compelling for me. Right now, this is a clear last place, but I would caveat that by saying we really haven't seen many Emerald cards, and most ones they've shown us are pretty bad. There are some exceptions, but they're conditional exceptions like Lady Tremaine. Other than that, Emerald is definitely the least service colored when it comes to spoilers.
All right, so we gave you the deck, we gave you the sort of the map, but you got to sort of take the steps yourself to get there, and that for some might be a little bit intimidating because you might never have played in a tournament. It's a brand new game. It's being marketed very casual-esque to a degree, so the appeal for some people is just like, I'm going to go, but I do want to succeed, but I don't have any experience. So yeah, we're telling you, it's not just the easy option, it's also the best option. It's
most likely, right? And
yeah.
If they want, like, if you are new and you haven't played much Lorcana, etc., right? Some heuristics in Lorcana, which might not be immediately apparent. You should almost always be mulliganing for early interaction. If your opponent drops a 1 cost that can quest for 2, or even a 1 cost that just quests for 1, and you have like a 3-drop, you're in a bad spot immediately. So you should aggressively mulligan. The mulligan in Lorcana is one of the most generous mulligans. It's debatably one of the most broken mulligans that I've ever seen in a game. Because what you do is you draw 7 cards, you put any amount you want on the bottom, and then you don't shuffle your deck, and then you draw back up to 7 how many cards you put on the bottom in your hand. So it means you're able to put the cards you don't on the bottom, and those cards you can't draw those cards. So it's different than other mulligans. It's the most generous mulligan, which means that you're quite incentivized to mulligan very, very aggressively for what you want. And I think what you want in Lorcana is early interaction. There are some key cards, like if I get Mickey Mouse and a broom in hand, I'm keeping that. Like, that's staying in the hand, right? Even though those cards aren't really early game cards, that's staying in the hand because it's busted. And I know my deck's trying to do that. But generally in Lorcana, you should definitely be aggressively mulliganing for early game interaction. Other than that, I think card draw is king in this game. Flake, I think if you have access to card draw, you should be drawing cards. Like, I think it's absolutely king. You will find yourself in many mid to late games in Lorcana top decking, unless you're card drawing. And that part of this game is not fun, and you don't want to be there. It's total RNG, right? Total variance. You're just like, do I draw something I can play? No, etc. And so you want to be drawing as many cards as possible because they have most cards have the modality being turned into resources. So they're all useful to you. But those are sort of my two heuristics for Lorcana. Other than that, it's very standard card game heuristics. Just outvalue your opponent any way you can. That's why the Mickey Mouse card is so good, because you're turning a single broom into like 4 brooms when you bounce it back to hand. Just outvalue your opponent, mulligan aggressively for early interaction. Definitely get high value usages out of your removal. Don't use your Dragonfire on a Cheshire Cat which is like like a 3-drop or a 0/3 drop. They try to use it when they like one of the best things you can do against your opponent if you have the Sapphire Song or the red Dragonfire, so unconditional removal, is when they play that big 8-drop that sits on that you can literally see on the front of the starter deck, like the Simba or something, where they play the Maleficent, you just Dragonfire it. But that's what you want to do. You want to be beating them on value, right? Because let's say they paid 9 for their Maleficent, you paid 5 for the Dragonfire, you win that exchange by 4 resources.
I think
you do that more than your opponent does, you win the game.
As like a rule of thumb, like when you're thinking about like, okay, what should I use these removal cards on? It's printed on the front of the box. Like that's like they are selling like the whole starter deck revolves around these appealing characters that are printed on the front of the box. So if you have a way to a card, like if you have a card that will banish a character, for the most part, unless you're going to lose the game or you're just falling way behind and you have to do it, a lot of the times you are literally just waiting to go ahead and goon their big play with that value exchange. It's like you said, they drop a 9, like something that costs 9, you hit them with 5, you got 4 change, you still get 4 change coming back your way. The other thing that I've noticed is like you mentioned, and the card draw being king, is that the games that we've played have, when it comes to top decking, I'm not saying it's a late game thing that you'll eventually get to. It happens really quick. You draw 1, and typically you're playing 2. You're ridding 2 cards out of your hand for the first 2 or 3 turns, and then like there's a potential where you're ridding like 2 or 3 you're ridding 2 cards out of your hand early, and then it's like 2 or 3 cards a turn, but you're only drawing 1, so you get gassed out completely early. So having a card draw mechanic is going to be a massive advantage for you. And what I can't reiterate enough is that sometimes playing the card draw card versus a rinky-dink do-nothing creature is the right play. It allows you to establish that and start drawing cards where you can get to those better pieces faster. You might fall behind on lore, but in the late game, when they're top decking and you've got options, that's your advantage. The other element I just want people to think about when they're playing this game is you need to think about the turn after the turn you're playing, where you might say, I'm like, okay, I'll do this to this. I'm like, oh, like all their stuff's tapped out. I have an opportunity here to quest for 8 and put myself ahead of them. But if you're putting yourself ahead of them, they might then regain control of the board, quest with the remaining characters, and then you're falling behind. You need to be able to think a turn or 2 ahead of, what are they questing for per turn, and how many turns are they away from a win condition or winning the game. That is something that when we were playing, I found. Like, there was a turn, I think, when you and I were playing where I'm like, oh, the easy answer here is I just go and quest with my 3 quest dude because you've got, like, 1 or 2 other dudes. It's not worth it for me to kill your 1 quest. But then in my mind, I'm like, if I just quest and don't kill your stuff, I lose. I just flat out lose the game. You play a character and I just fall behind. So having the foresight to put your opponent on a clock and say, this is how far they are, and this is how far I am. And if that clock is in their favor, you need to start cleaning things out. If the clock is in your favor, you need to start putting the onus on them to catch up and make the decisions.
In a permanent base game like Lorcana, you want to be ahead on board, which sounds simple, but you should always keep that in mind. You should never be questing for lore at some superfluous moment that isn't winning you the game. If you're going to fall behind on board, you will lose most, if not all, of those games. Other than that, the other biggest tip is you want to go first in Lorcana. I don't think you ever want to go second. Like, it's just best to go first by far.
Yeah, well, like, I don't even know what the disadvantage is. It's like I think they said like you don't draw a card, but who cares? Like at that point, if like your turn 1, it's like imagine turn 1 you pick up Pascal, and again the mulligan system. Like you could throw everything away, draw 7 new cards, and go for it. The odds of you finding early game presence are huge. So I would even argue for new players, because it's attractive, and this is what I used to do when I was a new player. Like, you play Hearthstone and you're allowed to mulligan cards away. I'm like, dude, I found my Dr. Boom. Like, I'm gonna win. No, you're not. There's a good chance you might not even get to turn 7 if you're holding that brick in your hand the entire time. You need to aggressively mulligan, and I know it's a starter deck, and I know there's probably few big cards in it. But if there's a 7-drop in your hand that you think is going to change the course of the game, you need to get rid of it, because there's a very good chance you're not going to get to the point where that card's going to matter.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, Flake, I think that's all I have for the starter decks. That's all I can extrapolate from looking at the front.
Look at the front of the boxes. Yeah,
that's all I got.
I think you did a masterful job, in all honesty, because again, we don't know the contents of the starter decks. We just know what is on the front and what a lot of the potential cards are. My suspicion is that whatever's been released and leaked so far are probably what it comes standard.
It's probably more as well, to be honest.
Yeah, there's going to be more, but...
Yeah, it's probably more. Honestly, it just... I don't know how much it matters. There's only a few cards you really need in the Amethyst deck for nothing to come close to the power level of it. Amethyst, Amber, the only thing that it doesn't really have is removal, unconditional removal. The other two decks have it. We've talked about it. But your cards are just better. They are just better. And you draw cards, so you don't need it. You're the beatdown. You're the aggro deck. You're also the deck that draws the cards, and you're the deck that has the highest value oriented cards, such as like Mickey Mouse in the deck. So, yeah, that's all I got. I think if I was a gambling man, I would pick I'd pick Amber Amethyst, and if they didn't have it, I'd pick Sapphire Steel, and then the last deck I would pick would be Ruby Emerald. Ruby Emerald could be good though. The evasive stuff, if it's packed full of evasive on the end of Ruby, could be hard to deal with. Emerald it sucks right now. Everything about Emerald is terrible. That's why you see all these like Emerald stands on Twitter. They're like, oh, I can't wait for their Emerald card. We got Reckless, which is this terrible ability.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
It's fine, but it's just not good, right? Like it doesn't get you excited.
What is it? It's removal with extra steps. Like it's just
it's like in this niche board state, maybe this will do something. It's like okay, so just Dragonfire for 5. This is way better. It's standard card game stuff. You want the fundamentally powerful things. You don't want these conditional. Just like if this happens, this card is finally okay. Emerald is just by far the worst color, but that actually doesn't contribute too much to me putting this deck at the bottom. It's more Cruella de Vil and Aladdin, and the combination of the two, because I think the only good thing you can do in Ruby Emerald right now is loop Dragonfire and play Maleficent on turn 9.
I dig it. Well, friends, if you're listening to this and you're going to Gen Con, let us know in the comments here. What deck do you intend on playing? What deck would you play if you were going? And if you do go, please let us know how it did go. Tweet at us at Podcana on Twitter, or myself, Flake, or Brendan. We'd love to hear what your war stories are, as it were, your pulls out of those packs, and give us a little in. Tell us what's actually in those packs, in those starter decks. Like if we have if you give us the list of what's in there and we know what these decks are, we will very, very much tell you that if there's another starter deck tournament, you play this and this is how you play it. Like we can give you the matchup, the notes. It's like mirror match, you do this. Against this deck, you do this. Against this deck, you do that. Congratulations, you just won the tournament. That's kind of what we're hoping to set you up for, not only for these tournaments, but all tournaments moving forward. That's what you're going to get from Podcana.
It's going to be really interesting for the people to go. I have no idea what the scene will look like, because I know it was so competitive to get in, right? So it could be people from all walks of life, whether they're looking to be competitive, they're super casual, they're for fun. I think the general aura of this event will be people trying to win, but people also just very happy to finally be playing with the cards. Yeah. So I think it'll be a good event for sure. I do think that to win this event, you will have to be a very good card game player. I do.
Well, that's what we're here to prep you for. All right, so there you go. We've got a mailbag, spilled ink. Let's jump right into that one there, Brendan Patrick. We've got one this time around. So let's get it, because we spent a lot of time digging into these starter decks. So what do we got?
Yeah, this one comes from at Lorcana Dad on Twitter, and they say, in honor of Mother's Day being this month, what Disney princess would make the best mom?
What's funny about this is that I literally had to Google when Mother's Day was, and then I realized that it had passed 2 weeks ago, and then I also remembered that I, in fact, called my mom on Mother's Day and all that other jazz, because I got worried, very worried that I may have missed it, but then I remembered, no, I called and everything. So thanks for putting the fear of God in me there.
Yeah. Just a little tip. You didn't know you can set up automations on your phone really easily to text people on certain days at certain times, and you can recur them weekly.
Are you saying
Not
that
I do that?
I was going to say, like, that is the ultimate admission there. I put my mom on an automated chat AI timer. Like,
it just says, "Hey mom, happy Mother's Day. Can you give me a call when you get a chance?" It just calls you, and you're like, what's up? What do you need?
Yeah, then they'll remind you, and you'll be like, oh, hey, what do you call it? Oh, yeah, absolutely, no problem. I should just do that for everything, frankly. Why not?
Yeah, the automated flower delivery got there too. Anyway.
We're good sons. I promise you. We love our moms. We're not degenerate like that.
Yeah. Anyway, the best princess would make the best mom. Dude, I have no idea on this one. I don't know if I've seen a lot of princess movies. You know, I think my Disney movie consumption back when I was an 8-year-old little boy was probably more geared towards like the Robin Hoods and the Jungle Books, which we've talked about a lot. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know that many Disney princesses, to be honest. There's the girl from Hercules, but I don't know if she.
I was literally just saying Meg.
I don't think Meg would be a good mom.
No, that's the one answer I was gonna give was I know precisely who wouldn't be a good mom because she just pieced out and went to go hang with like Hades. She's like, you know, I'm not saying moms can't get it, but like the first order of business, she's like, yeah, I'm just gonna go and, you know, hang out with the worst possible dude, and you know, sell my love down the river. That said,
here we go.
What, you got a list now?
I found my girl, Maid Marian from Robin Hood, the little fox. I don't know if you remember her. She would definitely be a good mom.
And not a fox is in the fact that she's like, you know, a fox, but she's an actual physical
a literal fox.
Yeah.
Literal fox, yeah.
I was actually thinking of like, I think it's Nala from Lion King. That's like Simba's girlfriend or whatever. Because what I like about her is that she went out hunting for Simba to bring back order to everything. She was like a true, you know, and not that she probably couldn't do it on her own, but she understood what everything was going on. And without her, Simba was not going to, like, you know, the old saying, which is like, behind every good man is a better woman kind of thing like that. Like, that's the way that I kind of see it, is that the reason why Simba went back and took back Pride Rock and beat the crap out of Scar and you know, sent the hyenas running and brought order back to the kingdom was because Nala had the gall to go out there on her own to bring order back to it. She knew how to take care of hers. And I think that Nala would probably be the best mom.
All right.
She's a lion. You have a fox.
I do have a fox.
Yeah. I'll tell you who it isn't. It isn't Meg from Hercules.
Definitely not.
No.
Definitely
All right.
not.
Well, Brendan, anything you want to say before we go?
Nope, that's it. I mean, I wonder if we're going to get the deck list before Gen Con. I doubt it, though. I think it's going to be a surprise of the day. Yeah, good luck to everybody that is competing. Congratulations on getting in. I know it's a bit tough. But I'm super excited for Lorcana to actually start coming out. You know, it feels like we've been in a bit of a lull period, not a lot of info. And I'm excited for that hype to pick back up, to see more cards, and to hopefully, you know, just get the plan for 2024. It's going to be a big year for TCGs. I'm interested to see how Lorcana plans to enter the market and compete with everybody else.
Well, and I think this is a good time to also remind everybody that, or at least reassure them, that we will remain a Lorcana podcast. We will not shift gears.
I don't know. 4 more weeks and no spoilers. This might be like...
You just said that August is like super close, and now you're already talking about it.
God, I can't even think of a random podcast name, but some Rebel something podcast.
Close.
That's what it would be.
Well, we were going to, when we were discussing this actually, because our buddy Charmer and I are starting a Star Wars podcast that we've named, we called it Wampa Radio. And we were talking about Rebel Radio, but there's already a Rebel Radio that's out there.
Yeah.
So
I believe that's like the Lorcana podcast that rebranded to that.
I think it was actually, yeah. I don't know. I think it's like Lorcana Cat. I don't know what the name of it.
I couldn't find what the original. If anybody knows, by the way, and I know I'm grasping at straws here, there was a Lorcana podcast that transitioned into a Star Wars podcast. I believe their current name is Rebel Radio.
I'm looking at it.
I could not, for the life of me, find out what the original Lorcana-based podcast name was. I genuinely looked. I went through all the reviews. Like, I was looking.
Yeah. Okay. So. Okay. No, I found the tweet or the message that you mentioned. I don't know if it was like a Facebook thing that they posted or whatever. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if it's called iRebel or it's just Rebel.
Oh, there you go.
But like, it's a Lorcana and Star Wars podcast. But yeah, they basically, I don't know. I like, what's fascinating to me is that this podcast, it's not because they're unsatisfied with Lorcana or according to the message. It's just like, hey, we didn't know Star Wars was coming out, so we're a Star Wars podcast now.
Yeah. So that's how it is. I mean, people are huge fans of Star Wars. Like, there's a big latent Star Wars TCG community.
I am well ingrained in that, but that's the thing. It's like,
so you're gonna get all these boomers coming out of the woodwork. No, I'm kidding.
It's the truth, though, dude. It's the truth. Like, what's funny is that they still have Star Wars CCG tournaments, like, on the regular, and they show pictures of like these like tournaments, and they get like a decent amount of people. There's like 30 or 40 people who show up for these major tournaments, and the average age is like mid-40s. But that's just the reality of it. Like, it's, you know,
it is, dude.
You grew up.
I mean, even Flesh and Blood is a new TCG. The average age is like probably late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, I think the demographic is like the spike in the demographic is 25 to 35. Like, that's the fatness. And if the game continues, I mean, it's only going to continue to sort of shift that way, right? So I would imagine, but we'll see. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all Lorcana appropriate ages, we do appreciate you watching, listening, and all that jazz. Don't forget to please give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this, whether it's Spotify or whatnot. It helps us immensely, so thank you so much for doing that if you have already. Subscribe to the channel, follow us. You can follow the podcast at Podcana on Twitter, myself at Watchflake, and Brendan is at BrendanAPG. Please leave a comment, tell us what you like about the show, and we're always open to suggestions, and we just like shooting the breeze with you, so thank you so much.
See y'all next week.
Bye.